Hi guys, I hope you're all well and welcome to episode 168 of the James Layton Fitness Podcast. Now within this specific episode we'll be discussing why there's no such thing as good or bad food, there's just good or bad diets. Now you're probably thinking, James, what are you on about? Of course there's good and bad foods. Now let me explain with just a brief story. So I was training in the gym last week and I was having a discussion with a good friend, someone I speak to all the time, and he said he was reluctant to finish off his Easter egg because he assumed that these were bad calories as such. The chocolate, the Easter egg is bad calories. And what I explained to him is exactly this. You really cannot judge a food in isolation without actually considering the rest of the diet as a whole. So in short, no food actually makes you fat in isolation. Only a calorie surplus makes you fat if the calorie surplus is in place over a chronic period of time. So in short, if you're consuming more calories than you're burning over a chronic period of time, you will gain body fat, regardless of whether the foods you're eating are considered good or bad. It really does not matter. If that calorie surplus is in place for a chronic period of time, you will gain body fat. Now here's the real important point. If you're training frequently and you're mainly consuming whole food, you're controlling your calories so you're not in a calorie surplus, there's no reason why you can't have some processed food in moderation. As long as those big key factors are in place, which is training frequently so you're nice and active, you're having most of your food intake from mainly whole food, single ingredient whole food, so lots of fruits and vegetables, lots of good quality protein sources. As long as you've got the majority, so for example 80% of your food intake from whole food, there's no reason why you can't have 20% of your intake from processed food, as long as those other key factors are in place. Now you may be thinking, surely sugar and processed food are really unhealthy and I shouldn't be eating any of those at all, but the reality is the devil really is in the dosage. Again, no food in isolation is harmful. What's harmful is an excess of calories, a calorie surplus over a chronic period of time. If someone does that and they start gaining body fat, as a result of that gained body fat, that's where the health problems start arising. But again, it's not the food, sugar or processed food in isolation, it's the excess calories that causes the fat gain, and it's because of that fat gain, the result of that fat gain, that's when the potential health problems occur. And I'm going to give you a brief story and explain why this is so important. This really is a topic that is very close to my heart. The reason why this is so critical is this mindset of good and bad food, okay, I have a box of good foods, a box of bad foods, this is what's really creating a unhealthy relationship with food. This is where you can pick up eating disorders, and I personally it was never properly diagnosed, but for a good couple of years in my late teens at least, I probably had a eating disorder. I was completely obsessed with food. I would literally just think about food and training all of the time, and basically if I ever had any processed food or food I'd consider bad, I'd feel so guilty, I'd feel awful. Sometimes you'd have binge cycles where you'd be eating lots of kind of healthy foods and then I'd binge and then I'd repeat the cycle, and it was just awful. I remember situations where I avoided social occasions, I didn't really want to go out on family meals, etc. I avoided kind of parties. In fact, I've said this before, I even remember going on a date once. I actually brought a Tupperware container with some of my food just because I knew I'd be out of the house for several hours and I didn't want to miss a meal, and that is that's not fun at all. You really don't want to be in that position. And essentially, long story short, I ran into a couple of great people. One, I had a coach that basically guided me, that basically explained that you didn't need to be eating kind of whole food all the time. You can have some processed food in moderation. And then another mentor who really helped me, not only with my nutrition, but then applying more of an evidence-based approach to my clients. And that's the type of content I produce now. And that, I'm telling you right now, was such a game changer for me. That really was. That changed absolutely everything, because I'd been in this position where I kind of thought I had to kind of live this lifestyle to achieve my dream physique, to achieve my health goals. But as soon as I started to realize that actually, hang on a second, I can still have some of these treats, etc., in moderation, as long as I've kind of got those other kind of key principles in place. So for example, calorie surplus if I'm focused on muscle building, calorie deficit if I was focused on fat loss, lots sufficient protein, mainly whole food. As long as I have those key factors in place, I could still achieve my goals and still have a little bit of processed food in moderation. I didn't need to be eating every 2 to 3 hours. I could let my preference dictate my meal, how frequently I was eating throughout the day, and that was such an eye-opener. I remember that being such a huge weight off my shoulders. And I know that for some of you, you may be falling into this trap because of social media, because of the information you may be finding online. You're falling into this trap that you think, oh, I must have these foods, otherwise I'm not going to achieve my goal. So I really do hope you take this to heart. Like I said, this is something that, like I said, in my late teens, this really did taunt me. Like I said, I'd wake up thinking about food, going to bed thinking about food, just obsessed with training my physique. Whereas once I got beyond that, I could essentially get better results while still having a life and still having some processed food in moderation. So remember, no food is good or bad in isolation. There's only good and bad diets. And by that I mean, is as long as you're having kind of the majority of your intake from, give you an example, let's say for example you've got one individual that has 80% of their nutrition intake from whole food, 20% from processed food, whatever they want, and their goal is fat loss, and they create a calorie deficit by doing that. They're going to start losing body fat. On the flip side, the person that has 100% of their nutrition intake from whole food, no treats, no processed food, no sugar or anything, but they don't create a calorie deficit, that individual is not going to lose any body fat whatsoever. Remember, that calorie surplus is the key. That must be in place regardless of how healthy the foods you're eating are. That is the key. So that puts in perspective what's important. The calorie deficit, if your goal is fat loss, that's number one priority. But thank you very much for listening. If you're still yet to subscribe to the podcast, please do so you don't miss an episode. These episodes come out every single week. And if you're still yet to download my free book, How to Set Up a Nutrition Plan, if you go to James Layton, Layton fitness.co.uk, you'll see a tab at the top of the page called free book, and you can download that immediately. I look forward to speaking to you next week. Thank you very much.